The bronze handle of the revolving door at 847 Fifth Avenue NU turned slower than usual that Monday morning. The familiar whoosh of glass against marble, the gentle click of well-oiled hinges, all of it seemed somehow off rhythm, like a clock missing a gear. Mrs. Henderson, descending from the penthouse with her Yorkshire Terrier, noticed it first. The door didn't anticipate her approach. It didn't glide open with that perfect timing she'd grown accustomed to over 17 years. She had to push it herself, manicured fingers against cold brass. And the effort, minimal as it was, startled her. "Where's the doorman?" she asked the concierge, a young man named Bradley, who spent most of his shifts scrolling through his phone behind the marble desk. Bradley looked up, confused. His expression suggested he'd been asked to solve a complex mathematical equation rather than locate a colleague. He checked the schedule on his tablet, swiping through digital pages with increasing bewilderment. "There's no one scheduled for the night shift. Mrs. Henderson. Haven't been for... Well, according to this, we've never had a night doorman." His voice carried the uncertainty of someone discovering a fundamental error in their understanding of reality. Mrs. Henderson's terrier yapped. Sensing the disturbance in routine, she clutched her Hermes bag tighter, as if the very fabric of her ordered world had begun to unravel. The security footage would later show a figure in a doorman's coat leaving the building at 4:27 a.m. The timestamp glowed green in the corner of the grainy image. A man of perhaps 50 years. His dark skin barely visible in the pre-dawn shadows, walking away with the measured pace of someone who had completed a long journey. But when the building management reviewed the employee records, when they searched through 17 years of payroll documentation and tax forms, they found nothing. No name, no social security number, no hiring date, no termination notice. Nothing but an absence that somehow felt heavier than any presence. Over the following days, the absence grew like a spreading stain. Mail began accumulating in the wrong boxes, not dramatically, just enough to cause irritation. Packages sat in the lobby, unclaimed, and gathering dust. The revolving door developed a squeak that maintenance couldn't locate. Small inconveniences multiplied like cells, dividing a word, each one insignificant on its own, but collectively creating a sense of wrongness that pervaded the building. Mr. Goldstein from 4B mentioned it first during an impromptu gathering in the lobby. "You know, I don't think I ever heard him speak. Not once in 10 years. The other residents exchanged glances, searching their memories for contradictions. But one by one, they realized the truth of it. The doorman had been a constant presence, opening doors, accepting packages, offering that slight nod of acknowledgement, but none of them could recall the sound of his voice. "He fixed my bicycle once," whispered Timothy Chen, the 8-year-old from 7F. His mother looked surprised. She'd assumed the building's maintenance staff had repaired the bent wheel that summer day 2 years ago. But Timothy remembered differently. Remembered dark hands straightening the metal with patient care. Remembered a smile that asked for nothing in return. Remembered feeling safe in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "Mrs. Rodriguez from the 3rd floor cleared her throat. He walked me to my door every night when I worked late shifts at the hospital. Never asked him to. He just knew." Her voice caught slightly on the last word. She'd been a widow for 5 years. Returning to an empty apartment at 2 or 3 in the morning, the doorman would see her taxi pull up and quietly escort her to the elevator, waiting until the doors closed before returning to his post. She'd tried to tip him once. He'd simply shaken his head and returned to the lobby. They began calling him the shadow butler, a name that felt both grand and diminishing, acknowledging his service, while maintaining the comfortable distance they'd always kept. The building manager, a sharp woman named Lydia Barnes, who prided herself on efficiency, spent 3 days combing through records. She found purchase orders for doorman uniforms, but no employee ID attached. She found shift patterns in the security logs, but no clock-in records. She found a ghost in the system, a presence defined entirely by absence. It was James, the overnight security guard, who finally offered a fragment of history. There was a young man, maybe 22, 23, came looking for work about 20 years back. This was before my time officially, but I was doing some freelance security work in the neighborhood. Name was... He paused, frowning. Started with an L. Lamar. I think. They turned him away. Said they weren't hiring, but Lamar hadn't accepted the rejection. He'd simply begun showing up at 5 each morning. Before the official day shift started, he swept the sidewalk, arranged the newspapers left by delivery trucks, sorted mail that had been carelessly dropped through the slot. No one had asked him to do these things. No one paid him. He wore a maintenance worker's uniform at first, probably salvaged from a thrift store. After 6 months, he'd found a doorman's coat, burgundy wool with brass buttons, too large for his young frame, but worn with dignity. The building's residents had gradually accepted his presence, the way one accepts a new tree on the street or a bench at a bus stop. He became part of the architecture, as essential and unremarked as the elevator cables or the boiler in the basement. Someone must have decided he belonged there. They assumed someone must be paying him, managing him, taking responsibility. But in the careful orchestration of urban indifference, everyone had assumed it was someone else's concern. Years passed. Lamar aged into his borrowed uniform. His movements developed the economy of long practice, the precise angle at which to hold the door for a woman with a stroller, the exact pressure needed to help an elderly resident with their walker, the timing required to have an umbrella ready before the rain began. He learned the rhythms of 500 lives without intruding upon any of them. The basement room was discovered on a Thursday. Marcus, the new maintenance supervisor, had been mapping the building's utility systems when he found a door that didn't appear on any blueprint. It was painted the same industrial gray as the pipes and conduits surrounding it. Easy to miss, unless you were looking carefully. The lock was broken, had been for years, judging by the rust, but the door opened on well-oiled hinges. Inside was a space roughly 10 feet by 12 feet. No windows. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows on concrete walls. The furnishings were minimal. A wooden chair that might have been rescued from a curbside pile, a small table made from a shipping crate, hooks on the wall for clothing. No bed, just a thin foam pad rolled up in the corner, the kind used for yoga classes. But it was the wooden box that drew attention, made of cherry wood, finely crafted but worn with age. It sat on the makeshift table like an altar. Marcus called Lydia, who called the police, who determined there was no crime to investigate. The room's occupant had vanished, leaving behind only this container of mysteries. They opened it together. Lydia, Marcus, Mrs. Henderson, and a handful of curious residents. Inside, nested in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, they were objects that seemed random at first glance. A leather glove, men's, size large, with a note tucked inside, the 12th of December. 2010Mr. Patterson, 8. C. Left in taxi. A child's drawing of a figure in a red coat, standing in front of a building. My hero, scrawled in green crayon. A hospital bracelet. A wedding ring. A Yankees ticket stub. A prayer card from a funeral. Each item carefully labeled with a date and apartment number. These are things people lost? Lydia said slowly. Understanding, dawning. But Mrs. Rodriguez, holding a small silver locket she'd mourned for 3 years, shook her head. No, she said quietly. These are things he saved for us. Things we didn't know we'd lost until we needed them again. The box contained 17 years of small salvations. A teenage girl's diary, returned before her parents could find it. A man's AA chip, discovered and quietly replaced in his wallet. Love letters that never made it to the trash. Suicide notes that were somehow intercepted. Each item represented a moment when the doorman had chosen to act, to preserve dignity or hope or privacy for people who never knew they'd been protected. At the bottom of the box was a single photograph. A young woman holding a baby, standing in front of a building that might have been 847 Fifth Avenue NU, but decades earlier, on the back, in fading ink, Mama and me, 1971. She said someday I'd live here. The building organized a memorial service. Though, memorial seemed wrong for someone who might still be alive, who had simply chosen to stop existing in their particular sphere. They gathered in the lobby on a Tuesday evening, the space that had been his domain for nearly 2 decades. Residents who hadn't spoken to each other in years found themselves sharing memories of kindnesses so small they'd barely registered at the time. He knew I was diabetic, said Mr. Patel from 10G. Always had a candy in his pocket on the days when my blood sugar was low. I don't know how he knew. Carried my groceries, hailed my cabs, watched my kids, kept my secrets. The chorus of small gratitudes built into something larger. A portrait painted in negative space. They knew him by what he'd done, not who he'd been. They'd been content to let him exist in the margins of their vision, a functional piece of their daily machinery. Bradley, the young concierge, had done some research. The uniform he wore? It's from 1987. That company went out of business before I was born. He must have maintained it himself all these years. He held up a photograph from the security footage, the last image of the doorman, walking away in that perfectly preserved coat. Brass buttons, gleaming in the pre-dawn darkness. What was his last name? Someone asked. What was his first name? Another added. And the question hung in the air, like an accusation. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, tugged on her mother's designer dress. Why didn't anybody know his name? The mother looked down at her daughter. Then, around at the assembled crowd of successful, educated, presumably observant people. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. Maybe that's the point. Sweetheart, we didn't deserve to know. The memorial dissolved into uncomfortable silence. People drifted back to their apartments, carrying with them the weight of 17 years of unasked questions. The lobby felt different now, not empty, but rough, like skin missing a layer. They hired a new doorman within a week, a cheerful young man named Eduardo, who introduced himself to everyone and whose name appeared properly in all the employment databases. But Eduardo worked only day shifts. The building management, after heated discussions and a close vote by the co-op board, decided not to hire anyone for nights. Budget constraints, they said. Though everyone knew the building's reserve fund could easily cover the expense, the truth, unspoken but understood, was that they couldn't bear to officially replace someone who had never officially existed. Late at night, when the lobby was empty except for the security guard, half asleep behind his desk. Some residents swore they could still feel it, that presence that wasn't quite a presence. To that attention that never intruded, the revolving door would sometimes turn on its own. They said, just a quarter rotation, as if allowing someone to pass. The mail would occasionally sort itself. A package left carelessly by the desk would migrate to the correct apartment door. Mrs. Henderson started a tradition. Every morning at 5 a.m., she would place a cup of coffee on the lobby table. Black, no sugar. Though she had no idea how he'd taken it, by 6 a.m., the cup would be empty. Eduardo claimed he didn't drink it. The security footage showed nothing, but the cup was always empty, always clean, always returned to exactly the same spot. 3 months after the doorman's disappearance, a letter arrived at the building. No return address. Inside, in careful handwriting, to the residents of 847 Fifth Avenue NU. A building is more than brick and steel. It's made of moments. Every goodbye kiss at the door. Every stumbled return at 3 a.m. Every first day of school and last day of work. I was privileged to witness 17 years of your moments. Thank you for allowing me to serve. The morning light comes earlier now. Spring is coming. May your doors always open easily. It was unsigned. Some residents wanted to frame the letter, display it in the lobby. Others felt it should be private, kept in the building's archives. They compromised by having it transcribed in brass and set into the floor just inside the entrance, where everyone would walk over it. But few would notice. The words wore smooth over time, becoming illegible, but their presence remained, a reminder embedded in the foundation. Years later, when Timothy Chen graduated from architectural school, he designed his thesis project around the concept of invisible infrastructure, the human systems that support our built environment but disappear into function. He dedicated it to the doorman whose name I never learned, who taught me that the most essential structures are often the ones we cannot see. His professor asked him to elaborate. Timothy thought for a long moment before responding. Some people don't leave a name. They leave a shape in the world, an invisible architecture of kindness that only becomes visible in its absence. We build monuments to remember the powerful, but maybe we should learn to recognize the monuments that are already there, the ones made of open doors and carried burdens and small salvations. The building at 847 Fifth Avenue Street ill stands. Eduardo still works the day shift, now aided by a computerized entry system and security cameras that record every movement. The residents know each other's names now. The doorman's disappearance having broken down some invisible barrier that had existed for decades. They hold holiday parties in the lobby, organize play dates for their children, check on elderly neighbors, but late at night, when the city quiets to a whisper and the lobby lights dim to amber, some say you can still feel it, that watchful presence that asks for nothing and offers everything. The revolving door turns a little too smoothly. The brass handles never tarnish. And sometimes, just sometimes, when a resident stumbles home from a difficult day, the door opens before they reach it, held by nothing but air and memory. In the basement, that small room remains locked. The building management sealed it after removing the wooden box and its contents, but maintenance workers report that the lock won't hold. They've replaced it 4 times, and each time they return to find it broken. The door slightly ajar, as if someone needed it to remain accessible. They've stopped trying to secure it. Some spaces, they've learned, choose their own boundaries. The last entry in the building's official log about the matter is brief. Night doorman position remains vacant. No applications being accepted, but below it, in different handwriting, No one admits to writing it. Someone added, "Position filled? Every building has its ghosts. But 847 Fifth Avenue NU is haunted by something rarer than death. It's haunted by a life so quietly lived that its absence echoes louder than most people's presence. In the end, perhaps that's the truest form of haunting. Not the dead who won't leave, but the living who never quite arrived, who existed in the spaces between recognition and dismissal, between service and servitude." The doorman left no forwarding address, no final requests, no explanation for his departure. But in the wooden box, beneath all the salvaged items, investigators found one last thing: a child's report card from P.S. Lou, dated 1978. The name had been carefully blacked out, but the teacher's comment remained legible. "This student has a gift for making others feel safe and welcome. He notices when someone needs help and acts without being asked. Whatever path he chooses in life, I hope he never loses this quality." Below it, in a child's careful cursive, "I want to be a doorman when I grow up." They get to help everyone who comes home. Some dreams, it seems, are worth a lifetime of shadows. Some services are too pure for contracts, and some names are written not in employment records, but in the accumulated weight of 10,000 small kindnesses, the architecture of care that holds up our world while we sleep. The door at 847 Fifth Avenue Street ill opens. Someone, something, ensures it always will. That's what doormen do. After all, they keep the way clear for others to come home, even when, especially when, no one remembers to say thank you, even when no one remembers their name.